Hey, everybody. So this is the second, well, really the third lecture PowerPoint in this series for the three-object project on destabilized form and 3D design. We saw one lecture on the power of scale before starting the first project, the first half of the project. And then before starting the second part of the project, I gave you a PowerPoint on the three-object project itself and showing examples in the art world. And now that we've looked at these projects, for those of you who are available for the critique, I hope you all were able to come and see that. You really should poke in. I can't write, I'm not gonna sit there and write. I could write a paper on each one of your projects, and I'm not gonna do that, I don't have time. So I will be assigning a grade. Again, these projects are kind of self-grading if you see each other's work and the comments that each other you make about the work. So this is a really powerful project in terms of seeing and in terms of learning the principles of how to make something look interesting. That's a good thing to know. Regardless of sculpture, regardless of anything, how do you make something interesting? And you can extrapolate this to other things, like I've mentioned before. This really is kind of at the heart of this sculpture class. This is kind of I wouldn't say a throwaway project, because a lot of you are going to have a really hard time making this thing work. It doesn't want to stick together, it falls apart. It's not something maybe you can keep. Well, maybe it will be, but it's really fragile. As it dries out, it'll get extremely fragile. So it's really kind of, I see it more as an exercise and an experience of playing with these principles of three-dimensional design, of destabilized form, how to make something look interesting. So I really want to drive this point home about these principles and how valuable they can really be. And I want to give you another PowerPoint to show you some other examples of three-object projects that people have done, but also to see how it shows up, these principles actually show up in other projects in the semester. And then also, again, to other art and design endeavors, just to kind of bring the point home. So again, this is the third PowerPoint. And again, don't see this until after the critique and having submitted your work. Okay, so I mean, that's when it's most valuable. You can look at it, of course, whenever you want, but this will be when it's most valuable. Okay, so let me go share screen. We'll go to the PowerPoint. And oops, where's that thing? Here we go. Boy, I need to get back to, sorry. I need to get back to the beginning. Oh yeah. Okay, here we go. So a lotion bottle, a big brick that was broken up, and a masking tape. So this is quite lovely. The objects are huge, and the way they capture things in the act of falling or sliding and slipping is pretty dramatic. Really big open spaces, big huge negative space here, big open positive spaces, really private spaces, things just touching on edges and stuff. It's very successful. I wish I could go all the way around and show you, but again, you've seen this one before. I think this is a backwards this time, but really beautifully crafted objects and really dramatic. These things become almost like tectonic plates. To me, they look a little geological, like shifting geological formations. So they really kind of play with scale and confuse, a calculator with a landslide, kind of, if that makes sense. This one's very interesting. You can't tell, but it's only balanced on one point, right there in the middle, and so it can rock. It's not touching here. And on the inside, there's huge open spaces. It's really quite a beautiful project. And sometimes the projects depend, sometimes they look more dramatic from one perspective than another perspective. And that's a good thing to know. So you can look at your project and see, where does it look most dynamic, like this, or down here, or up here? Do I want the viewer to look at it in the aerial view? So know your work so you'll know how it's most strongly presented. And then you can present it that way, either live and in person on a pedestal, like so you put it at eye level, or put it down below, Or you can do it in terms of how do you photograph the work. This part right here is a little bit unstable, I mean stable, but actually, or it's not really resting, it's not resting, it's kind of like on its side. So it is kind of falling. So, and there's only one little spot touching here. It looks a little stable, but it's not. And this big, huge bottle is falling off. That's parallel to the ground, but it's fairly successful. This was interesting because her objects were all three kind of fluid or sponges and things like that. And what I like about this, what makes it kind of unstable or moving, it makes it moving, is that it looks like smoke going on like this along the ground. So it has that kind of soft relationship to the ground that is very, and has movement to it, which is really inviting. All these things have sort of a movement to them that is important. Movement is always interesting. It's almost like frozen movement. Can anyone guess why they did well on the objects? I gave them an A-, I believe, on the objects because they were pretty good, but I gave them a D in terms of how they constructed it. And I'm wondering if you can figure that out. I'll give you a second to think about that. So let me break it down for you, unpack it for you. This is just straight up and down. This is just leaning. This is just flat on the ground. It's not even balancing. It's just stuck there. And everything's just sort of piled up on it. It's like, it's built like a teepee. You know, it's built in the round and it has a middle. No effort in terms of opening up the space. Nothing in this object, nothing in this project is falling. It really should be actually an F. They didn't capture any of the objects, they just put them together and just like that. Again, it has a center, it has a middle, no open spaces really. It's kind of like a tripod. They didn't really break it up. Things are straight up and down and resting. Everything about it is kind of like static. So not that it's bad, it's just all static. And in regards to this project, the person didn't follow these rules of destabilized form. Now, the rock project was done before the three-object project, but this particular student had two-dimensional design, which is very similar to three-dimensional design in that you throw off the center and you make things so that they have sort of an asymmetrical, unbalanced feel to them. So they have a little bit more liveliness to them. So if things happen off-center, the interest happens off-center. So they were really beautifully designed. This was a hard slab project. Usually things look very hard-edged and symmetrical and you know, hard-edged geometrical forms. But this person really kind of opened it up and used a technique to almost make it look like it was a flower or something, which is really unusual for that technique. I like that. That was sort of a disconnect that was interesting, if that makes sense. This is a beautifully made box. You can see the top is open, but it's leaning and it has a sort of tectonic shifting. Things are shifting like this and moving in it. So it's a very dramatic vessel that has movement to it and sheerness and like that. Really beautifully crafted. So you can see these principles being applied to even a vessel. I showed this before. This will be our hard slab project that we have coming up. And again, we're going to be inspired by architecture, but not just, but contemporary architecture. So things that are fluid or have movement or have an interesting relationship to each other. This would be where we start combining stable with unstable elements, which is very, very effective. So in the three-object project that we just completed, it's just like someone threw a stick of dynamite in the living room and everything is like, pow, it's like chaos. And that might be hard to wrap your mind around. But when you have just little elements of chaos in with stable elements, it's really effective. That contrast of stable and unstable is really effective. This is a coil project that someone did, very tall, it's probably about 2 feet tall, but I love how alive this thing is. It looks like it's underwater and just, you know, moving, and it captures movement. And it's not just flat on the ground here, you can't tell because of the shadows, but it undulates there too. So the whole thing is doing this sort of squeezing and squishing and fluidity movement. So capturing that kind of thing is really great. Even in pottery normally looks, let me get one. Pottery normally looks, I'll throw straight ahead. I'll make something that's very stable and, you know, same on here as it is over here. It doesn't have a lot of movement to it, although I left throw rings in here, which are sort of dramatic. but you know, it's pretty tight. It's pretty tightly made, really, you know, like that. But this is a Potter beginning first semester from Pitzer College. And the thing's about this tall, about 13 inches tall. And he really captured the movement of the wheel and the movement of it going around in a circle. It looks like a tornado. So instead of a dead pot, it's a really alive pot. And it has this like subtle asymmetries to it that are in a really kind of unfinished rim that makes it want to continue spiraling up or down, as it were, but very much like a tornado. Someone took a bunch of pots and then cut them up and reassembled them into a new form as a sculpture, utilizing some of the principles of 3D design. This is a soft slab project, and look how much of the weight is over here. So it's really kind of imbalanced. It has a viewing hole through it, which will be one of the requirements when we get to the soft slab project. But anyway, we'll be doing something like this. So, but anyway, it has a very dramatic feel to it because of the balance of it. This is also a soft slab project. I love what's unstable about this is that it has 3 different places. It has an outside, it has an inside, and it has a cutaway, actually 4. Outside, way inside, a cutaway of inside, and then all the way through. So it has all these 4 different levels of spaces, including seeing all the way through it, which I think is really beautiful and effective and very well crafted. All student work here I'm showing you, by the way. So, you know, my expectations are, these are what I hope people do. This is another soft slab project. By the way, these are all pretty huge. They're between 2 and 3 feet tall. We're gonna be working big on these. This is again a soft slab project. Again, it has a very undulating underground part here that goes all the way through, hole all the way through, really dramatic space in here. So again, and it has this lane to it. So it's a really dramatic, spiky, moving, alive piece. Now this one is interesting. It really has a bunch, it almost looks like something inside, like hitting elbows and knees, trying to get out, like it's trying to explode out of there. So it has that kind of a movement to it, which I really like. It's just sitting flat on the ground, just like plop. I think this is a good sculpture, but not a great one. The glaze on it is beautiful. It's an ash glaze. It beat it up like ash from fireplace with clay, and it beat it up. But I wanted to tell you something. This is a citrus student, and this is part of her clay portfolio. It's rather big. She submitted this work along with some other clay works from her class and got into one of the best architecture schools in the country based on this work. So architecture people just love when you start bringing in organic stuff. This is a pretty sophisticated piece, but again, it was in regards to what other students have done. It's fine. It's a good, strong piece. Not great, kind of this sort of a plop sculpture just sits there. But I want to tell you, do not disregard the work that you do in this class, because if you are able to capture motion and instability in sort of an elegant way, it'll take you. You can use that for other things. I mean, you know, it's not just throwaway work. So I'm hoping that encourages you. Nice contrast here. This is also unstable, kind of like Borg, if you're familiar with Star Trek. But we have a human leg, and it's big. It's like life size. This whole thing's about 4 or 5 feet long, with a hard edge, geometric, almost machine-like, attached to a machine-like type apparatus or something. So I like that contrast of man-made and organic, or industrial versus, you know, flesh, figurative. Very good contrast and very kind of unstable in that way. This is, yeah, conceptually unstable. This woman had been in a relationship for about 3 years during college, and they broke up, and she later, she deleted all the emails. Her emails were all on Netscape. She later Googled the ex's name, and all the emails, even though deleted, still existed in cyberspace, which is kind of weird. So what she did was instead of like trying to delete them again, she took all those emails, she made decals of them, which you can do. and they become like iron oxide, and you can just lay them on there and fire them on. She made stone tablets, which is one of the earliest forms of saving information and cataloging information with stone tablets, writing on clay tablets. And so she made these stone tablets from things that used to belong in the internet, online, just sort of floating out there in the ether. So I love that high tech versus absolutely low tech. And she also mixed and matched the phrases in the email, so it became sort of like poetry a little bit. And I love how it bubbled up in some places and just disappeared. Anyway, really brilliant project, bringing high tech and low tech together in very sort of an unstable, kind of weird way. This woman dipped these really weird objects like Chinese noodles and rice paper. She dipped it in very fine liquid porcelain slip, and then she fired it, and the original material fires away. And then she mounted them so they were these really, and they are really, really, really delicate crystalline forms, just sort of like floating and growing. Really beautiful. M.C. Escher. He destabilizes directionality. You think that the water is going down here, but then the water is flowing up. And then these pillars are really wonky how they're arranged, and they don't make physical sense how they work. The whole thing just gets, anywhere you look, you get disoriented looking somewhere else. And that disorientation makes you want to keep looking. That's the whole idea behind these principles. They keep you wanting to keep looking, and they suck you in and make you interested. It's a really great trick in art practice and any practice to be able to do that. M.C. Escher, again, very famous one. Anywhere you look, you think you know the directionality and you have the orientation, and you look somewhere else and it gets all screwed up. Frank Gehry, the guy who did Walt Disney Concert Hall, I'm going to show you a bit of his work. He has some parallel and perpendicular, and then he screws with it in other places. So this, again, stable versus unstable, symmetrical versus asymmetrical, straight versus curved. I mean, really good contrasts. Very interesting. He did this building. They call it the Fred and Ginger building, named after Ginger Rogers, Fred and Ginger Rogers. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, sorry. Old-timey 50s actors, dancers, a lot of dancing. People say, here's the European architecture in Prague, Czechoslovakia. That's the normal architecture. And then all of a sudden, and it's very formal right here, and all of a sudden these two buildings and these windows, they get all wonky. And people who've been there say it makes the entire city look like it's going to break out dancing, which I think is pretty cool. That's wrapped in plexiglass. There's a side view of it. This is also Frank Gehry's work. This is the University of Minnesota Art Museum. And it almost looks like one of our 3-object projects, except he couldn't put space, if you try opening up space in architecture, you start springing leaks. So just the engineering is too hard, but still it's made up these modules, and modular is what we will be doing on our architecture project too. But anyway, just keep that in mind for later. But again, you can see the Minnesota River here is reflecting off the titanium right there. But anyway, destabilized form in architecture. This is Frank Gehry's Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. And it's made after a ship. So you can see it looks like a ship. So it looks like the Disney Concert Hall, sort of, but it's also like reminiscent of a ship. And it has a lot of reflecting places. Here's a reflection of it doing total opposite in the water. He even plays with cement and makes cement look like it's made out of cloth, which I think is very cool. This is sort of the look, if you were to walk around the Disney Concert Hall, you get the sort of a look of that as you're walking around. Almost like mountains or, very odd shaped valleys and stuff. That's looking up at the windows in the Guggenheim Museum. If I would take that photo, I'd have to have someone else take it. I'd fall over if I was looking up like that. Even the glass looks like it's shards of glass broken and falling. Objects in the act of flowing and fluid and falling and woo, woo. This is conceptually very interesting. This is in a work that was done in a nursery where they grow things, that kind of a nursery. And this woman had crocheted out of metal fruit with baby nibbles on it. So I like this whole idea of fruit that has nourishment, and you could suck on it and get nourishment, but they're made out of metal wire that's been crocheted. So very interesting contrast of materials and what they, wire versus fruit, sustenance and baby nipples. I mean, just the whole thing is just very interesting. I thought very beautiful. Andy Goldsworthy does a lot of earth art. I've showed you his work before, I believe. In this series, he throws things in the air and has it photographed as it's falling. So objects in the act of falling, it becomes like a line drawing in space. His arches, they want to collapse, but they balance each other. This is rocks that had been, he made this early in the morning. He dipped the rocks in a river nearby, very nearby, right off screen here, and he froze them to the wall. So they're frozen in place. And then he took a picture, and then at about 10 o'clock or whenever the sun started really shining, that whole thing fell apart. Again, a lot of objects in the act of falling, a lot of space in there. It's Andy Goldsworthy. This is all Andy Goldsworthy. Icicles grow down, not up. So he broke them and refroze them in place. That's not what icicles do either. Balancing rocks, in the act of balancing, falling, floating. This is interesting in that he puts these sticks together with little thorns. These vines are sticks, then puts them together with these vine thorns that he finds locally right there off the water. He made this in the water so that the water completes the circle. He put these together with little chunks of icicles in 2-inch chunks and froze them together, and this falls apart. It's actually in a movie called Rivers and Tides, and shows him making it, and it shows it melting and falling apart over a period of a couple hours. So it's very ephemeral, this art too. And that's unstable. Something that's ephemeral like that's really beautiful in that it won't last. We are beautiful creatures because we don't last. We are very unstable. Icicles grow down, not up. He did this kind of stupid. He did these big snowballs, like snowmen, big rolling snow over different kinds of debris. And then during the exhibit, the snow melts and leaves a pile of debris in its place. A kind of a ephemeral, funny idea. I showed you Robert Therian, how the power of scale can throw things off. That's actually unstable, to make yourself feel like a little kid again. Again, Robert Therian. This is photographer John Fall. He's from Los Angeles. And this is before digital photography. These were done in the 70s. So you'll see this square in the photograph that's not drawn in. What he did was he put tape. It's actually black tape. He puts in the environment and lines the camera exactly up so that it looks like a 2-dimensional drawing on 3-dimensional space. And if you move that camera 1 iota anyway, the whole illusion of that 2-dimensional drawing gets totally whacked out. It all becomes little pieces of tape in the environment doing odd angles. I mean, it's tape right on the rock. So it's pretty interesting. Same here, tape on the doors, making straight lines. 2 dimensions against, he's playing 2 dimensions against 3 dimensions. That's the instability. You can see in here the gap in the tape on these. It makes it look like a 2-dimensional line drawing on 3-dimensional space. That takes a long time to do. This cube is so weird. Every time I look at this thing, I don't know, for some reason, the light bulb looks like it's facing upwards right now. If I went back, sometimes if you think about something else for a little bit and go back to the photo, it'll change orientation. This cube will go like this. It's a really weird phenomenon. Again, oranges should be getting larger as they come closer to you, not smaller. So he's fighting perspective here, playing 2 against 3 dimensions. And then I come to Burning Man Art Festival. I went there in 2002. I think I showed you some pictures of this before, but I have some more pictures this time. And what's sort of the stabilized form in this is that, again, this is not this art festival. It lasts for a week, and it's in conditions that don't support any kind of life at all. You have to bring all your food, all your water, and instead of it being death and deadly in this 108-degree alkali dust storm environment, it becomes this radical arts festival for a week of unbridled creativity. So out of this sort of death, you get this extreme life and extreme creativity. It's built in a horseshoe, the whole community, and then in the middle of the horseshoe, it's like 5 square miles of empty playa or desert, dry lake bed where all the artwork is put. Also, what's sort of unstable about this is during the George Bush years when he was encouraging people to consume more so that the economy would correct itself, which is a really funny thing. So it's very capitalistic. There's no buying and selling or anything here. You can't buy stuff. You can barter and you can give. So they call it a gift economy, which at that time is so kind of radical, very unstable, or very different in contrast to how we normally are with transactions. So you would go there with the idea of giving things away, food or artworks or anything, or bartering for it. Hey, I'll give you this for that. You could buy coffee in the main tent and some ice, and I think lemonade, but that was about it. There's a sandstorm. Lamplighters putting lights out on the corners. This is a jazz bar. Oh boy, I'm running low on power. I hope I can make it through here. If I get cut off, you've seen enough, but I'm gonna keep going. This is a jazz bar out in the middle of nowhere. I lived in a family camp, and Santa Claus, 108 degrees, Santa Claus came and visited, as well as some flamethrowers in the middle of summer. So that was pretty cool, pretty unstable. All the cars are art cars, and the year I went was water themed. So everything dealt with water. There's no water there. And so it was pretty fun. They were kind of like tour buses. Even the bicycles, they don't even leave the bicycles alone, and everything gets made into an artwork. It's really wonderful. It's a gift economy. This guy brought ties for everybody. This is the day after a sandstorm, so they're all caked with mud. I went here. I had some friends who got married at Burning Man, and so I came here and got a tie that I put on over my pajamas, and I had a nice hat that someone else gave me. So I was really, really dressed up to the nines, sort of, for this wedding. That's pretty funny. A lot of good humor there. The camps are even very, very sophisticated and are actually artworks, some of them in and of themselves. This is photographs of the heavens, showing up to the heavens. That's quite profound, I think. Installations where you can walk through it, where this like 100 yards feels like it's part of the artwork, even though the artwork is far apart. You feel like you're walking through it, that you become part of the art. More installations. This is put together they work on it all year with a jigsaw and plywood, and they put this thing made of thousands of pieces of plywood, the jigsaw pieces, into this temple. This is where my friends got married, and then they burn it up at the end. So none of the artwork is permanent. It's all ephemeral. It's all burnt up at the end. Again, water world, so this sort of jellyfish, beautiful installation. And clamshells to walk through, again, installations. You can see the temple in the background. You really get a feel for the landscape here too. And this is scarecrows at the end to keep people from coming in the other direction. Although if you try coming from the other direction, you'd probably die of thirst trying to get there. So, and that's the landscape where all that creativity happens out of. So anyway, that is my take on the value of destabilized form and three-dimensional design in these principles and how to make something look interesting. And I hope that gives you some inspiration to pursue this kind of design and extrapolate to other areas in your life, even to papers that you write or whatever, or how you present yourself in an interview or whatever, how you dress, how to make yourself look unique and stand out, and what kinds of things, that kind of thing. So it's very enlivening, and I hope that you get that from this, and I hope that you apply these principles to your other projects throughout the semester so that your work is even more interesting. Okay, thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed it. There we go. Bye-bye.